Okay, we'll start off with introductions. Jim Campbell, Union Editor.
Carol Malmquist, I represent Manchester. I'm a volunteer.
I'm Glenn Simonson, I'm the CFO with the Sun.
Bud Harris, Director of Information Services, Kitsap County.
Joe Bull, Communications from D&D.
I'm Dave Seaver, I'm the General Manager of the Kitsap PUD.
John Beard, I represent Bremerton and Central Kitsap.
Okay, we invited you here so we can talk some general, some specific issues about fiber optics and so on. If a few folks would like to make some opening comments, for 5-10 minutes, that'd be fine.
I think where this particular conversation came up was as there was an effort through the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council Board to help gain financial match for the broadband stimulus package that the utility district and NOAA was pulling together. So I think that's where the process started. I think that the real story is what the utility district has to tell. I was just helping facilitate rounding up some cash match, so I really think they're the ones that have the business story to tell you.
So, but I guess I think it'd probably be best if we initially just responded to questions that you all have. The problem for us is we're so overloaded with information that once we start spewing that we don't want to watch the eyes glaze or any of the other things go with that. So it'd be probably more productive if we could respond to specific questions and general questions to see where that goes for it. So
I guess what, if we may, what is your understanding or knowledge level of the fiber optic network? Should we start there with a little?
I think just some of the basics. I mean,
okay.
The county, cross-county line.
Okay.
How we got to that point.
You want to?
I'll start, and then Bud will actually clean it all up.
And I think this is fair.
Well,
there are a lot. I run into people all the time who don't realize, what a robust fiber we have.
Well, let me actually ask. I suspect the Sun's business model, at least in terms of distribution, has changed over the last 15 years.
It's changed quite a bit over the last year.
and your mission is probably essentially still the same, and the purpose and the motto that you have, which is just an awesome motto if you take out the Scripps motto. But your distribution is continuing to change radically, I suspect. And we'll start this with. But do you want me to continue or do you want introductions?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure, Mary McClure with Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council.
Ed Stern, but nobody will take ownership over me.
So anyway, back to...
And just FYI, we are
recording
this.
But you guys are out of the picture. Yeah. In more ways than one. If you're
Now, if you want, I'll jump up as a non-staffer and really make it seem like a family home.
No, I'm feeling comfortable already.
But anyway, your model obviously has changed, and the model for many businesses that deal in information, deal in dissemination of information, deal in creating communities by knowledge has all changed. Business has changed. E-commerce has completely changed from what they're talking about. And the advent of it is not just the internet, the ability to communicate, but to do it faster and with much more capacity. Fiber optics are strands of glass, and we can move massive. I didn't bring a graphic that we use showing a trickle of water and a fire hose and beyond, but we can move massive amounts of information on a strand of glass with a laser pushing light. And our backbone that we built throughout the county is 144 strands of glass on the primary route, and then the redundant routes are built in. And then what's called, there's a technology called dense wave division multiplexing. You break the light down into light waves. And so on each of those strands, you can now shoot a single light wave. And so you have multiple light waves on a strand of glass. The strand of glass is about the size of a hair, and then it's encased. And so this, essentially, information can move at the speed of light. I mean, literally at the speed of light, however efficient your lasers are to move that information. This has allowed amazing transformation in terms of creation of community and technology. Communities, our mission is to build community. It used to be just communities of place, but it's also communities of interest now, and strengthen that. And this technology allows that. But it also brings this transformation, is great change. And with change becomes, how do you survive? How do you make money in this environment? What do you do with it all? And so we're exploring all of that as we create our network. Our network that we've created, we only have wholesale authority. We cannot retail, so we couldn't provide a connection directly to the sun. The legislature, when it passed its legislation allowing us to get into telecommunications, put that stipulation in 2000, 99, 2000 timeframe. And so we have to, we created, after that, we created what's called, we created the CareNet, Community Access Readiness Empowerment Network. With that, what we've done is we're taking our fiber to every public facility and building out to every public facility, and we're building out to a number of medical facilities and all of those elements. So if you look at the readiness, we're creating a resilience for it, because we look at every public facility, and others will become community centers in the event of a disaster. China just had an earthquake. We suspect, we know that we're due. In 1700 was our last 9.0 earthquake of the Cascadia subduction zone. We expect that in every 3 to 500 years something happens. So we expect that something will happen. And communications, we would like to have a resilient and very robust communications network in place. We've been able to do that, and then we partner with others, or we try to partner with others, our service providers, to provide access and empowerment, or economic empowerment. So in our partners to date, including the Northwest Open Access Network, I'm the Vice President of the Board of Directors of the Northwest Open Access Network. The Northwest Open Access Network actually was just awarded $83 million for round one of the BTOP money, and we're going out for another $40+ million grant for round two, which the Kitsap element is about $3.1 million that is being put together for it. But the Northwest Open Access Network has created this network much similar to ours with member PUDs and other entities that straddles the state into Oregon and into Idaho and Montana. So that's what we've done to essentially be part of this transformation and to try to explore and stay ahead of where we're going for our community with it as best we can. Now, we're kind of like the submarine service, the silent service. There's not a whole lot of people other than Ed that touts us, and Mary and others that tout us are aware of us, but we function much as the silent service as we're continuing to build this out. We do water and we do telecom, county, essentially regional and countywide.
Okay, that grant award was from what?
It was stimulus funds.
Okay, it was
stimulus funds, and it was a first round. And I can show you a map of the area that was covered. It's primarily southeast and along the south and west Washington is where that grant effort was. This second effort covers more of what I call a para-urban area, underserved in rural Kitsap, and Clallam, and then northeast Washington as well.
Knowing that, of course, is a Washington-wide collection of networks.
It's a mutual corporation.
And the document I gave you is their formal application, grant application. You will see all types of public agencies and participants across the state, but you'll also be able to identify those in Kitsap County.
Yeah,
and then there's a general summary by applicant, and that's where the Kitsap PUD comes in as a participant. Here are the sort of participants, and here it is broken down. And the Kitsap shows you the 8 in budget, 5 in match, and so the grant would be 3 plus or minus. And then if you'd like, if you're interested, you look at every project by
And we would be happy to answer as questions come up in the future. I mean, we track all things broadband and telecom. I mean, we track nationally, internationally, regionally. We track all things because the world has. It's a small world.
It'll swing weekly. This issue, this equipment, it is absolutely fascinating. We have up 120 to 130 miles I call it cable, I get in trouble for that, of fiber.
Multiply that by 144 strands, times that, to give you the capacity of what we have deployed.
This is 21st century, very big, very fast stuff. We are the freeway in the county, in most cases, a lot of cases. And then our partners are the off-ramps.
Backing up just a little bit on, into our real basic here, when was the freeway completed?
It's
Never
not
complete.
completed. When was it? We started in about 2000. We had a lighting ceremony in 2001 at the Admiral Theater for it, where we had initially done the first part of the backbone, and since then we built.
I mean, the trunk line is not completed.
So our figure 8
Yeah.
inside the bulk county is complete.
Okay.
And so we're still, what we're doing is we're continuing to
Right.
build out. And if you think in terms of circles, okay, as opposed to straight lines, because when you cut a straight line, you now have two pieces, it's a non-functional network. On a circle, if something happens, you've got redundancy, you can go the other direction depending on your
So
electronics.
if a barn burns down in a lot.
There, it's absolutely. And we have offered.
I'm glad you.
We have offered
before.
We've offered.
Bring it up.
I'm on Comcast. I was out.
I know.
We've
We were all
offered
scurried.
redundant
It was like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
So, but the key is so what we're doing once we've got the initial figure 8 is we're continuing to build these circles with our points of presence so that we continue to strengthen the networks.
Just this last year, we built into Port Orchard, both from an east and west redundant direction. We're building all the time. And we have, there are two planes to our construction. It's get the backbone out there and then get it out to meet customers that come with retailers. We'll get a call, so-and-so needs this, how close are you? That is privately funded for any private interest, but the basic backbone is our other plane that works.
Where is it? Is it underground?
Some, but
yeah.
most of it's aerial.
We hang it on due to sound energy poles.
So you're subject to trees falling on it and...
So
Fiber's interesting.
Fiber, most of the fiber we use is Kevlar coated, and so if you might sometimes just
It's fascinating.
Google, look how we use that term now, but anyway, go online to do an information search for pictures, and you see a telephone pole that his cars run into and knocked down, and it's being held up. It's generally the fiber that may be holding it up on that Kevlar coated. It's highly resilient.
Electrical line goes down, shorts out, you're out of business. Fiber goes down and lays on the ground and runs.
It doesn't.
In the water, in the mud. It's really interesting.
When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, they actually had on their fiber stalwart. It was when they started reconstruction, and the backhoes tend to rip it up. That was a problem. And we've had a backhoe take out fiber
Because all the
on
signs were
Central
gone
Valley
that says
Road.
call in case of.
Yeah.
So it's on the poles. We have a pole attachment agreement. When you work with the owners and others.
This is his
Hang
baby.
it. Some places we go in, excuse me, existing conduit.
He's out.
Others.
Others we do our own dig. And Dave was talking about the change in technology. Even the deployment of this cable is changing quickly. There is what do they call it? The cut slice or the?
Or you can do micro trenching, some of the other stuff.
And the sidewalk.
If you look, the sidewalk has the expansion material in it. You get to the point where you can actually run down the seam with multiple fiber and lay it in that way as well to go to the different premises so that you don't have to rip up the road.
They'll put like 4 parts of the cable into an orange plastic housing, close it like a sandwich, drive it down into a cut about that thick, and you never see it.
Where do you get that technology with plumbing now?
Well, the
We're in the water, we can tell you about
the
that.
physics are just a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
We have 12,000 water customers, we experience all that.
Bingo.
You were talking about a figure 8. I was aware a few years ago, we had some stories on it. You started off around Belfair or around the county line, I guess, basically wound up the tip, the northern tip of the county. But so I was thinking just like one line, but it actually
no.
was figure 8, you said.
We're going to continue building out circles and circles.
And
Ultimately, the ideal is
this is going in a matter of
and the
months
network is-
down Port Orchard, which you can see how it comes in. Goes there.
we're
Now,
we're multi-home. We come in through Mason. We actually, from Bremerton, we run over to the Weston underwater using Quest cable. And we will be, NOAA is bringing down, and we're actually kind of across the bridge as well, so that we're going to have
So we'll have
multiple,
triple ways
in and out of the county.
Now, I have to tell you, this was just prepared for our Google request for information application. We have security issues on this.
Sure.
We could dial this in a lot closer if it was important to you, but this is what the public gets to see with no street names or anything, so we have some issues.
One of the things.
What's a security issue?
If I want to cut anything off for here, I can blow up. that
We carry, that network carries a lot of first responder, healthcare issues, information security issues, location issues.
Connections.
I don't want to, terrorists, but we have federal and state regulations that we have to.
Homeland Security considers there's 18 critical sectors. Water is one of them, telecommunications is one, power.
If you hadn't had stimulus funds, how are you funded? Is it through government?
The CARE Act is funded through, PUD has taxing authority, and so we've been collecting taxes for a long time, and we put them all toward the CARE Act in 2001.
The part that runs to the public agencies.
So, some explanation of the relationship between all of the local governments, the other local governments, and KPUD is probably be useful. While the KPUD is really focused on the open access CareNet that has no, it has off-ramps to the providers like Comcast and so on and so forth. There is, it's basically a non-secured redundant network, and that was the whole concept. But all of the state, federal, county, city governments have a tremendous amount of traffic where the security is a major issue. And it starts there, the intergovernmental network with federal, state, county, and cities has a very high level of encryption and security. And then that's something that the county basically coordinates among all of those other governments. Then there's a second ring that brings in first responders, fire, etc., that is also highly secure, not as secure, but highly secure. And then the KitNet goes out even another level to bring in school districts and some of the folks who deal with critical incidents but aren't a government entity in the IGN intergovernmental network. And basically that whole level of firewall, if you will, is essentially an application. It is, it's what these guys do, county and that whole group of people, and we coordinate it through the KRCC, Regional Council, as part of
Can you be
the
hacked?
KitNet. Can we be hacked? Can we be hacked?
Anything can be hacked if you have the right tools and the persistence. So that the concept of data security is trying to build as good a firewall as you can
How do you monitor? How do you?
there's software you can use, it's network detection, intrusion detection, and there are tools that we can know if we in fact
So you
have.
have like a central place where you're constantly monitoring your
From a security standpoint, everybody along the chain has a responsibility. So yes, at the county, we are the conduit from the IGN piece, the intergovernmental secure piece. We're the conduit from the cities to the county, onto the state, and then onto the Fed. So, and then there's multiple agencies at the state, there's multiple agencies at the Fed that you can all branch off to. So when you watch television, you watch NCIS or CSI, those types of things that talk about those databases, they're very real. That data flows through this network. That's why we care about security.
That's
But-
why we don't put street names on the maps.
Yeah, that's part of it. When I put out a map of our nodes, you won't see any IP addresses because that makes it very easy to start hacking. But everybody along the chain has a responsibility to maintain their firewalls to a certain degree of security. So if for the federal level, you have FIPS 140-2, which is federal IP security standards. For the healthcare, you have HIPAA. There are standards and best practices that have to be followed for the people that are utilizing these transports, the actual physical transports. We bring on kind of the logical layers, but we have the responsibility to make sure that we're adhering to those data security
And
layers.
even at the physical transport level, we have what's called a NOC, our Network Operating Center, and that's located in Spokane and dual-owned, and we have our people also monitoring that and participating from our office as well in that. So we are able to monitor the network, and we identify, because this larger network does, we're prime target for hackers, where people are interested. So we have, while we are open, and our goal is to be open so that we don't shut anybody out in an emergency, we do have levels of security where we monitor what is going on as well.
Does it happen frequently?
So
The hacks? I'd say we're 99.9% solid. The only real issue that we've had, it's not necessarily hackers, it's people that inadvertently do some things that flood a network with traffic. And that is as good as a hack, because if you can't get the critical data through, you might as well have been hacked. It's a little bit easier to clean up a traffic problem.
That's a good point to mention something. When you talk about overloading, it's difficult. I'm probably the newest one to this, and it's difficult for me to get my head around the size and the speed of this network that exists, this physical network that exists in this county. But the terminal gear is the place where there's reduction in size and where this can happen.
Big overloading, because it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like that should be an issue.
Overloading the backbone isn't an issue. It's what ins and outs. It's the
At the user level, you might have somebody inadvertently start a job stream or get a router or switch in a loop, and all of a sudden it's flooding traffic out there right back to itself. But when I think of networks, this is the way I try and explain it to commissioners, is think of your data network like a road network. You have lanes of the freeway. If you create loops out there, you're flooding that lane. It's no longer available. If you get several of those going, you flood all the lanes of whatever bandwidth you've purchased, and therefore no real data can get through. So that becomes part of the problem that we deal with. And you've seen it. You've heard that people get denial of service attacks. You'll have complete ISPs that get taken out because somebody initiates a process that floods that particular farm of servers with phony traffic.
And even without malicious efforts, you've heard of what the iPhone is doing, and iPad, what the iPhone is doing to the AT&T network. AT&T has a certain level of capacity they've built. All the new apps, what you're doing is you're creating congestion on their network and slowing it down and then shutting it down. And people are getting frustrated with that because we want everything very fast.
It's just like creating a traffic jam over at the I-5 any place you want to look every Friday night.
That's why Google wants to do 1 gig to every house and whatever. The interesting about the Google network, and when we put our proposal into Google, it wasn't send your money, it was we've already built the network you want, tell us how you want us to continue building it. And to try to encourage them to, because we're still too small, we're not, we've got 250,000 people as opposed to 500,000 they're looking for, and they're looking for highly dense, highly urban, but we're hoping that we can draw some attention. Because our infrastructure is already capable of doing multiple 10 gig information where they were looking at the 1 gig.
If they read it, it's going to be interesting because what we said was, here is an open access public network, broadband network. You don't have to worry about pole attachments or running cable. Come serve the community.
Tell us what you want.
We don't know what'll happen with it.
On a bread and butter level, if you will, what are some of the advantages for some of our public entities having this?
It's a cost savings for me, pure and simple, in that KPUD has this vast network out there. In the past, and this only goes back 5 to 10 years, the cities and the county would all have these multiple T1 circuits floating everywhere, which had limited capacity, but also were fairly expensive. We now have the ability, all the campus that are, and I call it the campus, but around the county, there's 17 or 18 county locations, as well as the cities and the fire agencies. We're sharing that same network. We're sharing those same roads. So when you think of these concentric circles, those aren't separate networks. They're running on the same highway. So in the same vein that we wouldn't expect law enforcement to build their own road out to Poulsbo and then fire to build their own road out to Poulsbo, et cetera, we have this bandwidth that we can then share. So it truly becomes a cost savings as well as meeting the needs of bandwidth.
These users ride on that open access at cost network.
The first thing that we did, we probably targeted, this was even before the county, is we looked at education. And we partnered with Quest. What we did was we started on Bainbridge and then also with Olympic College. And what we found initially, because again, we don't control what the retail provider ultimately charges. We can't deal directly with an end user, and the schools or the county right now is an end user in this. But what we did is we provided a huge level of bandwidth so that ultimately Bainbridge, for example, got, for the same price that they were paying for their T1s, they got this monster pipe. And they were able to rethink how they do technology. So instead of each school, whatever, having a data center and whatever, they're able to standardize more and control stuff and move toward this cloud computing that you're going to see happening, things like that. So that's one of the benefits. I mean, when we walk a tight line, because we're wholesale only, where I have commissioners that believe we ought to be able to, for the public good, with public resource, serve the publics. I mean, at a minimum, we should be able to serve the publics, so that because we do data and we do applications, we do a vast amount of mapping, and we tie in with the county's mapping stuff. We do all kinds of weather-related data and water data, and that should be made available. And there's efficiencies and effectiveness that could be, if we could, publics to work with publics. We can't go there right now. The legislature at this point in time said no. And so we have to, we work through, ultimately our citizens and customers and other governments are at the good graces of the service providers that will retail our service to all.
And are there any?
Oh, we have partners. I mean, we have service providers. Excuse me. There are a number of service providers, and we like all of our service providers.
They all have
Having
different
watched
business
all of
plans.
this evolve, the reality is that some of our members are keenly aware that there is and this is not promoted by KPUD, but watching the bids that they get, it's pretty clear that there's a markup factor for basically a service that is being provided, that if we didn't have that markup factor, it would be. And one of the things that the regional council has been promoting with our state legislators is that we want permission, not for KPUD's sake, but for our members' sake, for the KPUD to basically provide the connectivity on a government-to-government basis, with the idea that the government is so struggling right now, and
Anything you can get, anything you can get. Yeah.
so we've promoted that for the last couple of years, and who knows how that
There have been
will play
two
over time.
bills introduced since the original statute was passed. Well, two serious bills about some type of retail authority for public utility districts. And they don't move for various reasons. The bills don't. Part of the reason is that the PUDs feel rather awkward in being advocates of this because of the competitiveness. And if you think it through, many of the opponents of these bills are our partners. And so there's a delicacy there. But the rationale for the government to government is growing. I say respectfully, the nonsense of a cable that long being in the middle between the library and the PUD monster pipe, and what's charged for it is starting to soak in, and the rationales.
The whole idea, when people think, yeah, internet service, I mean, and so we confuse the terms, and it's not something the public easily grasps, other than they recognize, wow, I get my entertainment now, or I can communicate in some fashion. And for the public, that's, you don't care about the technology, you just want it to work well, right, fast, and maybe have what the Smiths and Jones have, I mean, and at a reasonable price. And so this one's it's a difficult nut to crack because nobody knows, they really don't know what could be. We haven't done a good job understanding what can be and what might be. And it's right now it's being defined by Comcast and the others with Xfinity and some of the other things. And so our expectations are somewhat lower than they are in other countries in terms of what can be. I think I'll go back to that motto, which I've just quite taken with, give light and the people will find their own way. And I'm just not sure how to give the light to in this because it's so complicated. And so I would certainly, if you find interest in this topic and as you get into it, if there's things to do in a very, what I want to call non-partial educational way, we'd certainly help support that because we're trying to learn too in this process.
Are there other states where consumers have access?
To public networks?
Right.
Yeah, there are some.
Even in the state.
So, well, even in this state, Tacoma.
Some municipalities have authority by their structure to provide a telecommunications utility, not unlike a water utility.
Tacoma's Click Network.
So is Tacoma doing the last mile then?
They do
to consumers?
retail. They do retail cable service because AT&T and others came down so hard on the decision makers. They all decided to only wholesale the internet, so they've got to have a service provider in between. That was an internal decision. It's not a force. It's not law. It was the law. I think we're the only entities. I think charter cities can provide it. But I may be confused. It may be code. I'm not sure. Well, there's one form of city that can do it. Otherwise, the others can't. Tacoma was able to do it.
Did you guys look at it?
Yeah.
What were you
Charter
structured properly?
cities can only do those activities that are specifically
In the charter.
allowed. And code cities can do any activity that's not prescribed again. So it's
Okay.
code cities who
Code
can do
cities,
it.
okay.
Codes can
So
do it.
Bremerton's a charter city because you guys had that election 30 years ago. So you have to depend upon specific authorities to do what you do, whereas code cities that follow the RCW can do anything that except what they're told not to do.
So there are a few code cities.
And that there are other states, but it's a fight across across the country. There were issues. There were hopes by some, like the Utopia Network in Utah. There was a big network that was being created there, and it was it had a lot of resistance again by the incumbents. There are a lot of efforts, and so some public interest groups were hoping that the feds would just come out and say any entity, including all governmental, can provide it. But there's still, for PUDs, we are still creatures of state law, and so even if the Fed said any entity, our conservative nature would say we still, I think, need to get the state's permission for us, since we're a creature of the state, to do that. But we'll see. The interesting thing about the whole telecommunications arena right now, I think that it's cellular is the only place where you have true competition among providers as opposed to competition between technologies. And so where I live, I have a choice of one cable provider, one phone provider for DSL, and then satellite, but I'm surrounded by trees. So I can do technologies, 3 different technologies, but I can't choose among 5 cable providers if I'm unsatisfied with the one I have or multiple internet providers. So we really don't have competition within the technology, just among the technologies. So you have what's called a duopoly that's been created. It's not truly a monopoly because you've got an alternative or maybe 2, but you don't have multiple. You really don't have true competition.
Yeah.
And you see, anybody, anywhere can ride our backbone.
That's the key.
And so if 5 of them wanted to run up to Paulsbo and compete up in Paulsbo, they could jump on the backbone. It's open, it's at cost, and they can do it. But it's a really strange industry because we see a lot of companies wanting to have their own proprietary backbone. And the more we look into it, and the more you read about it, it's a treacherous business. These companies have nothing they can rely on. There's no security. There's no time frame. I mean, tomorrow's long distance for them. The only thing they can count on is their customer.
Capturing the customer.
And so capturing with those contracts and providing the applications, They can't keep up with technology. They even have trouble with regulation, but they get us, and that's the only certainty they have in their business, and it's very frustrating for them, I understand. But anyways.
We got all of, through the KEDA, the Economic Development Alliance, there's a broadband initiative that has to do with let's expand the extent of broadband available in Kitsap County. And so we got all of the broadband providers, all the middlemen together and basically said, so we want to expand capability. And after some pretty frank conversation, they basically said there's only one way you can do this. A, we're never going to share any information at all, period, end of story. Don't even try. And I think Ed has experience at the state level through a governor's task force on all of this. The same story, they are not going to share. But what they did say was drive demand, and that will drive expansion. And which led to a lot of our work in the telework area, because obviously government can seed some of those things by making applications known to people, and then they can go out and demand their employer and so on and so forth. So we sponsored and then got state funding to do a telework pilot project in Kitsap County and create a toolkit and so on and so forth, which is another whole conversation. But the how you really grow this is, there's some pretty subtle marketing issues and thinking that goes on. And I'd be real interested, Ed, in anything that you had to share from the governor's task force perspective.
3 points, and I'll start in the weeds and then work up to 30,000-foot overview. You ran an editorial today on Transportation 2040 based on Ed Friedrich's article from a couple days ago. And you were right on with the points on physical modalities, the tolls, taxes, bridges, roads. Where you might have missed the point was, and I'm going to hand this out here, the real impact of Kitsap County, I'll pass that down and I dog-eared the page, was in our Kitsap Telework Pilot Project, the adoption through the Governor's Community Trip Reduction Board when we delivered that to the legislature. We were able to modify the plan in advance of the vote, so it wasn't subject to the vote, in March for telework and telecommuting as mitigation for tolls and taxes. Because what the plan is going to really squeeze people over the next 30 years to pay for all this build out. So I think hopefully in Kitsap we're aware of to be careful what we wish for. Because right now if we're granted those things that Transportation 2040 calls for and what our delegation and we want in Bremerton and everywhere, more ferries, more bridges, more roads, what do we become? A bedroom community. And what are the implications of that on our environment, on our families, on our tax base? We have to be very careful at this moment. And so that is one of the comments I wanted to make on the editorial today. In reacting to the present, we're missing the future. Secondly, why Kitsap then? Why did the telework project happen here? Why? We were an early adopter through the efforts of the Kitsap Regional Economic Development Council and their committee working with the KPUD. We were one of the first adopters when this emerging technology of fiber optics and the ability to deliver it rurally was happening. And right now we enjoy one of the most robust systems in Kitsap in the state. The problem is in 2001, it's as if we have an I-5 with no off-ramps and on-ramps. That's truly what we have here. Why? Because the emerging technology freaked out the legislature with the pressure they had from the business community. Because everybody wants to make money from this new emerging technology. And that's a very dangerous situation. And so what Bud and David and this fellow, oh yes, you, Jim, and Mary have been working on is the government adoption without stepping on the toes of the elephant in the room, which is trying to balance the pressure from the private sector wanting to make a profit with this, what is this? It's a great public need. And my final point is we have here the emerging roadbed of the 21st century of commerce. And either a lot of money can be made on it or it can benefit the country and the world. And I liken it to as if the Erie Canal in 1820 had been tolled and owned by a private company, or Lincoln never granted the railroads the ability to get to San Francisco and access the gold and silver fields, and it wasn't public, because it was built with the public land grants that Pope and Talbot got even a piece of. And as if the interstate had not been built by Eisenhower. So that we're at that crux right now, where we need to decide, what is this thing? It's the future of commerce. As it exists right now, it's as if we're building roads that each have their own ownership, their own tolls, their own police, and their own regulations. Every couple miles, every couple of feet, every couple 100 miles. If we had built the road system in the United States that way, where would we be with our commerce today? I don't think we'd be one of the great countries. So these are really what's on the table here. And Bud and Mary and David have been working very hard not to step on the toes of the elephant, and I congratulate them.
And I think, with all due respect to all elected officials everywhere, even any that might be in this room, it is critical that we not stomp on the private sector's toes and start a backlash against this level of cooperation and innovation, because they're political creatures, and we have to make sure. I mean, we're walking a tightrope as we ask legislators for permission to do these smart things, recognizing that there's a future somewhere out there that we're not looking at right now, because we're taking it step by step and allowing our understanding of the possibilities to evolve.
What I was going to add while Ed was talking, and before I go, I mean, it needs to be very clear that this PUD and even that the association has not been an advocate in any way for full retail.
Absolutely.
And because there is a good partnership that exists. Something that we've started to notice at the PUD, and it may have taken 10 or 12 years of or 15 years of internet experience by the American public, but this ability to log on and access your government or buy something from Costco, we are at the point now where this is no longer a novelty and something only 1 out of 4 homes in the neighborhood does. We are, if we aren't there already, we are quickly approaching the point where access to this type of electronic roadway is a critical and almost a necessary civil opportunity and responsibility in America. It's really interesting the way it's changing. I told Dave the other day I cannot go and physically pick up forms anymore from certain governments. I have to download PDF files. And
it's not, my board isn't taking a position, so this is just my position. But I'm very concerned about the social equity aspect of this, because the bottom line is what we're doing is we are beginning to create a political/economic elite. College educated, upper income, have access to their governments, have access to information, because they don't think anything about spending $75 to $100 a month for entertainment/internet access. But what we have is we have disenfranchised people now that don't have access to they've got to get on a bus to go to the seat of government, as opposed to be able to get to it in a more convenient method. And as we're looking at furlough days and closures, they can't even get access to that if they can only go on a Friday.
I was up at the courthouse Monday, and I walked through and watched people buying their license tabs. I haven't purchased a license tab at a counter in 10 years. And they're up there doing that, and they've driven and they've looked for parking.
Right. Medicare Part D, online, I mean, some of those enrollments. And so what we're doing is there may be levels or whatever, but I'm going to be very interested to see how this plays out, because from my aspect of it is we are now creating, and particularly if we go to online voting, but we are creating a mechanism or a tool where our whole sections of the population can become disenfranchised.
Well, on cost basis, business and government are pushing their customers to this access instead of the phone interview.
But what are you seeing in terms of e-government trends?
I'm being pushed every day, literally, to create more and more online applications so that things can be done. We're promoting right now, just a small example, the 311 concept that you probably have seen or heard in various places. We're trying to evolve that. but it takes time and resource and money. But the other expectation of that is that people then need broadband access to come in through the portal to create that request. More and more of our activities of trying to provide government services out through the internet. So it drives to the very heart of what David is talking about, in that we need to be very careful, whether it's government services, education. There's education coming out nowadays that needs to reach out to the far reaches of the community, because when you come to the major public schools, they have massive broadband, and they can watch these interactive programs and be involved in that type of education. But if you're at this little school out at the end of the line someplace, you don't get that. And so what they've put together in meeting this application, they're pushing fiber out to those locations where it will be available to the far reaches of the county. They are creating the opportunity where it's not just no child left behind, it's no child left offline. That's really the phrase that needs to be going forward. And where I get frustrated, I'll share some of your passion. At the federal level, they're calling broadband this low speed. I could ride a bicycle that fast. Broadband needs to be fiber. It needs to be rocket fast. You can't do what needs to be done over air cards. Even when 4G cell comes out, it won't be fast enough. Some of the things they're talking about with WiMAX and the different wireless technologies, it is not fast enough today, and it won't keep up with the demand. You really have to have fiber out to those locations to make those things happen.
Did you read the
Personal
WiMAX
opinion.
2 announcement this week?
No, I did not.
Anyway, there's very good, technology's doing fantastic things. The key
What
is
will
to
you
make.
be doing to help the traffic jams that you were talking about? Because it doesn't matter how fast the fiber optic network works or how many people get on it, but if you have people getting on it and on the freeway entrances, so to speak, that it starts clogging up there.
There's an aggregation process that you go through. There's ways to manage the amount of traffic, so you have to buy the right amount of bandwidth to fit the location. So for example, within the county cloud, I'll refer to as a cloud because that's kind of the popular phrase, we have certain locations where we're running 100 megabits, some that are 40, some that are 10. It's based upon the amount of traffic, and then that aggregates up. No differently than as you drive in a freeway. If you're out in the country, it's only 2 lanes per direction. But as you get closer to the city, it becomes 3, and then 4, and then 5. You do the same thing with how you build and aggregate your networks from a user standpoint.
So if you have somebody that's flooding with information, you go back to them and say, you need more than your...
I call their knock and tell them to shut it off. or ask.
Right.
Which they will immediately do.
Among all of these users that basically says if there's a problem and they don't fix it within a certain period of time, they're off.
Right.
Because it's important that there's responsibility.
There are rules to play on this network. Firstly, the first two rings, because the first 2 rings of the concentric circle environment are public safety rings.
Backing up just a little bit to the last mile, I won't say Joe Six-Pack. Do you think eventually, because of some of the forces such as you mentioned, basically social equity, which is certainly on the national radar screen right now, advances in technology, so there's going to be more of an appetite to be able to do more stuff, for people's homes. Do you think ultimately, these are going to be, forces enough to overcome the peculiarities, proprietariness, and some of the politics that are holding up the last mile?
This stuff, these are going to drive, because everybody's going to get them, they're going to be cheap and ubiquitous, but they use a lot of bandwidth. And all of a sudden you have everybody putting onto it in a wireless fashion, and whether it's GSM or CDMA, whatever your technology is, in a wireless fashion, they're going to be driving a lot of stuff, and so we're going to have it. So the networks are going to have to, at least what we call the backhaul networks, our backbone type networks, are going to have that robust capacity. To the home, I think that to every major institution, facility, or school, or whatever, you're going to have fiber.
Right.
That is future-proof. Essentially, and then it's just the electronics that can change over time and whatever. But there may be other technologies, combinations of technologies, wireless and whatever, that works for the home for an internet experience. It may not work for an entertainment experience completely, or a gamer's experience. I think that all of those are going to play, because there is a cost that goes with it. The incumbents, whether it's cable or telephone, have created what we call legacy. A legacy system is something you've invested in, and now you want to get its return as long as you can over time.
Standard investment.
And most of that for the phone companies has been copper. And even for the cable companies, and now they're running the fiber to their trunks, and they still do that coax or a copper type solution. It takes time and money to change all that out.
Even so, do you think it's inevitable?
I think for us, for the United States and the state of Washington and Kitsap County to remain competitive in an international arena, it will be inevitable. And my concern about our competitiveness and our kids is how quick are we going to do it? Right. Are we going to do it too slow, and we're now trying to play catch up, which we already are with South Korea and France and other countries?
Economics will drive it. Generational issues will slow it down. Cultural issues will play both ways in it. But I think that if we step back for a minute in an enterprise open economic system, which mostly America has, there's no way that you can continue to bind books and cut trees. Well, I don't have to tell you all about paper. I mean, yeah. So it's I just think that's I think it'll drive it. I have no idea in even 5 to 10 years what the equipment will look like in our pockets. I mean, if you just think back 5, 6 years, okay. So we don't really know where it's going. I've seen eyeglasses with virtual screens that come on and vibration into the bone for sounding. That's all people carry. It's like 3 stages away now from what we know as Bluetooth. So you don't know where it's going, but I think they're gonna demand it.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, just look at the medical that people can have access to from their homes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, stick your finger into a probe and then.
Well, look at power and energy. Everybody's talking about these smart grids, and by the way, that's a whole nother discussion. And when you think about it, the smart grid, we're looking at it for water. The smart grid has 2 ends to it. It has the purveyor's opportunity to manage their resource or distribution of their product. Okay, but really, what's scary for a lot of businesses is it also empowers the consumer. Okay, and so there's 2 sides to it. Our spirit is give these people choice, give them information. They're going to make. We remember what the P in PUD stands for. Okay, and let's see what that's like. Just a quick sidebar. Our preliminary review of smart grid for water, we ran into something that I didn't anticipate, and that's the correlation to electricity. Every time PSE talks to someone about reducing their hot water heating costs, their washing dishes costs, their washing dryer costs, they're talking about water use, time of day, and amounts. In fact, I was talking to the folks at PSE. It's interesting how those 2 utility commodities actually track each other in a smart grid use, smart grid. So we sort of need to keep in touch with each other, lest we're trying to tell people when to use water, which in turn will dictate when they use electricity to heat it, to move it, to spray it. It's really fascinating. But I'm sorry, I got off on that. But you don't do that on copper. You may not even be able to do that on coaxium. You need fiber.
Is it real expensive?
It's like anything else. The first pieces of equipment are going to be a lot more expensive than the others. And the truth of the matter is, we hear a lot more about smart grid than actually and in reality exists today. It isn't nearly as fancy as we all get to hear about it on television.
So when are you asking smart grid going to be expensive, or are you asking about fiber optics?
Oh.
It all depends. Well, we ran some preliminary numbers because we initially we were approached to do a local utility district, actually at one time on Bainbridge Island, on the north end of the island. While we were having the meeting, Comcast decided, okay, we're going to move fast, and they finally provided service to the customers out there, and the customers okay at that time. But we were looking where it might cost in the neighborhood of $1,000 a home to run fiber and put it up. Now that would be amortized over 20 years, so the question is what's the value of that? And for people, we still have difficulty knowing what that value is. The denser it is, the lower cost it is. The more rural it is, the higher the cost is. It's very similar to for water for us running water mains and those kinds of things. So that's what it was. And we could look at updated numbers if you're interested.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
The beauty of glass.
It's the latest technology.
It is, and I suspect it'll, depending on demand, because it spiked where we had long wait times for fiber because everybody wanted it, and then all of a sudden it became a glut, readily available. But I suspect that in time, costs will come down because you'll have more of it produced. And we'll become better and better at the installation and making the connections with technology.
And it lasts a long
Oh,
time.
fiber, yeah. We're giving it a 20-year life, but we suspect, we have no track record yet, so we suspect it'll probably be, 5 times that, but we'll find out.
Hey Ed, you've been certainly over the years one of the most outspokenly bullish advocates of the last mile. What do you think is going to be the tipping point on that?
When it becomes more evident that our national economy is highly dependent on this channel to transport goods and services, and that the roadblocks to small profit-driven concerns hindering it are outweighed by the larger public common good. And we've been through this many times in our American history on all kinds of. This is not untypical for emerging technology because as Yankees, we want to make money from everything. We're only dragged kicking and screaming to the common good, contrary to popular belief.
Do you have confidence in that?
Oh yeah, I have confidence in human nature. That's what I have confidence in.
Which aspect of human nature?
Big G.
When reality
Fear, greed,
Self-interest?
Maslow's.
But you know, one of the things we're seeing is that the schools get it.
Sure.
And our kids are going to drive this. Whether they can move all of us with a lot of gray hair fast enough to let them be competitive in the world is a question. But they will make this happen. And their parents will make this happen.
Well,
And that's what I have hope for.
yeah, I know the kids will make it happen. My biggest struggle is the day-to-day dealing with people who can't get their car tabs, can't catch up with their food stamps and whatever, because when they went to the library was closed, and that is the only access they've got to.
Well, we're pretty well out of time. We have an hour for this.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Hope that works.
It's 8.
Ken,